You're listening to the Voice of Reason. I'm Dr. Len here with Francesco Garapoli. All I can say is we've gone through so many things here that are challenging that it leaves a lot of us in a place where we're not sure how to be responsible. And what I mean about that is the ability to respond to the situation we're in where we feel so far out of control that we don't know what to do. And the question that comes into my mind is, how does trust and faith fit in all this? You have trust that the universe is taking care of you, faith that it's taking care of you. What's your role in this? What do you need to do to make it work? Because I always say, and I think most of us would agree with this, that what we have to do is to find a way to take our own responsibility. Because if we don't take our own responsibility and do the work we have to do, it's not going to work. You have to participate. You have to make a commitment to what is happening and then take a positive stance. And the stance that Francesco and I are always saying is center to your heart. What is it telling you? Are you afraid to come forward with the things that you're thinking about? Because if you don't come up with some kind of solution, you can see where the direction is that we're moving. We're in trouble because we have acquiesced. We have acquiesced to the things that we're being led to do without taking that ability to respond in a way that we know we need to have a positive course of action that can take us out of that mess. Francesco, that's what you're always talking about. You're right on the money.
Hey, guys, I'm going to cut in. I want to make sure you're recording this.
I am.
Okay, see ya.
Thanks, David.
You want us to start again?
No, keep going.
We're rolling. We're talking to the universe, and
we are talking to the universe. You bet.
You know,
and to ourselves.
That's right. And we are the universe. And people have to remember that you are your world. And if you define yourself from the external references of the media, of politics, of the medical community that's insane, then guess what? You're insane, right, Len? You
Absolutely.
are what you think. You are what you believe. And this is like psychology and spirituality 101.
Absolutely.
And the question is, yeah, are you courageous though enough to believe that and to live it?
Well, are you foolish enough not to? Because you see what's happening. Is that okay with you? It's all right to see that America is going broke, that people are losing their homes and their jobs and their hospital insurance, soon to be in food lines if it continues like this? Is that okay? You think you're going to be saved by either one party or the other party? We have to be Americans who stand up as Americans and do what we have always done as Americans. And that's at the grassroots, be solid and to not acquiesce, to know what's right and follow that heart.
Yeah. And to be sovereign in yourself. You know,
Yes.
We forget that we talk about a sovereign country, a sovereign nation, our community. That's all beautiful. But if you're not sovereign in who you are, like, what are you contributing, Len? What are you contributing then if you're off balance, off centered, angry, or fearful?
Yeah, well, that's right. You have to be centered and be constructive. If nothing else, it's talking to your family and talking to your friends and listening and caring about what they say so they can be heard. And then forming some kind of consensus that makes sense to everybody, if possible, so that we can move in a direction that has power. We're guided by the power that we take and the power that we believe in. And like you said, what you believe makes all the difference in the world. It does even in your health. What you believe affects your biochemistry and your physiology big time. And if you have a positive effect, you even get the benefit of the placebo effect. And if you have a negative effect, you get the opposite of that, the nocebo effect, which means you become powerless and you become a victim and things fall apart. This is a time that's a calling for strength, a calling for not acquiescing and to take part.
It's a tough one though, Len. I mean, when people are watching the story unfolding, and it's a story, you know, life is really just a story. And you have to look at who's telling the story. Sometimes it could be your parents' story, that your parents' story is playing out in your life, or your school story is playing out in your life, or your traumatic lifetime story is playing out in your life. Right now, we have a mass media that's telling you a story,
yes,
just like all the other stories. You have to decide, do I pick a story because I like it? It serves me? Do I pick a story because it doesn't make me feel afraid? Or am I going to look at them all as generic stories that influence me if I choose?
Yeah.
And when I'm sovereign, I become the storyteller. And as the storyteller, whatever you hear from the media, from politics, whatever, has a lesser role, a lesser influence than
Yeah.
the story you tell from your heart. It's
Yeah.
fascinating, really.
Especially today, where you're getting censored every time you turn around. And when
Yeah, a
you
lot
see
of
the
people are.
president of a country who's got millions of people following him, even though he's got people that are definitely opponents as well, and to not have a voice because the businesses that are in the mainstream high-tech industry are able to stop the kind of information sharing that's necessary for us to know the whole story. A partial story is dangerous. You hear just one side, you're going to be affected by that. And if it's repeated over and over, what do you think is going to happen? It will be the narrative that you take up. And that narrative has to be one that's got to be balanced. If it's not balanced, then you sit in a situation where you can't make an intelligent decision. You get stuck.
Yeah, I want to know I have access to all levels of the spectrum of information. I want to have access to people I absolutely don't believe in. I want to have access to people I might believe in. I want to have access to people who I trust. I
Yeah.
want to have people I don't trust. Remember The Art of War, Sun Tzu's Art of War, ancient book from China with a Taoist flavor to it. He said in The Art of War, know your enemy.
Mm.
So if you shut off the information to your enemy, you are at a loss of making good strategic decisions. If we don't know information in the medical world, for instance, that is all the ranges from the people who are freaking out about vaccines to the people who are making the vaccines. I want to have access to all that information, Len,
Yeah.
and then I could make a good decision. I don't want somebody filtering it for me, because what'll happen? I have to trust in their filter, and I don't trust their filter.
Yeah, well, that's right. You can't just accept what they say, because there are conflicts of interest almost always in one point of view that's presented. People have a vested interest. Maybe it's a financial interest. Maybe it's power. Maybe it's some religious thing. There are all kinds of ways that people can have conflicts of interest that put you at a disadvantage if you just hear one side of the story. So, as you said, we got to have a collective way of getting information and look at everything. I started an organization back in 1994 called the Health Medicine Forum. And what it
Yes.
was designed to do was to bring integrative healthcare into the mainstream. And we moved in that direction. Why? Because we listened to everybody. We invited anybody who did any discipline to come to our meetings and do what we call show and tell. They talked about what they did and why they did it and what it meant and how effective it was. Sometimes it was stuff that we wanted to hear. Sometimes it was garbage. It was like, people are crazy. But we had an open mind, and we have that open mind, and we take in information, and then we come to a consensus on it. That's how you get information that's solid. That's how you become sovereign in a way that's got real teeth to it. And we wound up, I moderated something like 350 events over about 15 years. And you can imagine what kind of an education I got in medicine.
Sure.
We had a model that was integrative, holistic, person-centered, and preventive. And now my practice is that way, and lots of other practices are moving in that direction. I feel very happy that we were able to get together and form a community of people who wanted to learn as much as they could. It wasn't just about doctors or just acupuncturists or chiropractors or body workers or people that do all kinds of different things. It was, what can we do if we work together? And you know what happened, Francesco? We wound up and you know this because you participated, we formed what was called a healing circle, which is what we need today. It's about bringing people together at the same time with a person who's a patient, who has a health problem, and listening and caring to what the different perspectives are and what you can do. That's what America needs today. It's grassroots community where we listen to one another and do it in a way where we're respectful and open And what comes out of that is a consensus. And then the grassroots strength, which has always been what America has and what it stood for, will step forward.
You should have healing circles with politicians. You know,
Well,
strap them to a chair and then get a bunch of people around talking and make them listen. But, you know, I joke, but I don't joke, because this is what we're missing right now, because most politicians are getting influenced by one side PACs, you know, political action, you know, committee things. They're getting influenced by corporations. They're getting influenced by very powerful money oriented groups that have very loud voices.
yes.
And this, what does that do? That shuts down the voices of the average person. So all of a sudden the masses, right? The
Yeah.
majority of people are the quiet influence, and the minority are the big voices in
Yeah.
big influences. So the world's gone nuts.
Well,
And those healing circles were great, because we'd have 7 or 8 doctors sitting around the circle
of different disciplines.
and
All different,
different disciplines, not always agreeing with one patient.
right.
And that one patient would, describe what they were going through. We all knew the story beforehand. They told us firsthand. And then we got to all talk about what our various approaches were
Right.
and what we could do to help that person to
Exactly.
find their healing path. And it was beautiful. And yes, it's very impractical in the real world, but it was a perfect example of what could be. And maybe with technology now, we can do more of these things, Len.
I think we can. There's something about listening and caring. You know, we're in a situation where a lot of different disciplines are together. What amazed me about that is how each person was really concerned, and they wanted to
Right.
hear what the patient had to say. They wanted to hear what everybody else had to say. It was a real village or a community. And when you have that kind of setup and you're listening and caring because you want to know what people think, it makes a world of difference. All of a sudden, you start to go, oh, I never thought of that. And what I found was almost every discipline at the end of a 2-hour session, which is what we did about 250 of those circles, by the way. We found that there was consensus from different avenues. The chiropractor thought one thing, the naturopath saw another, the psychologist saw another, the priest or the rabbi saw another. And when you got through, a lot of the time there were tears, not just from the patient, because we saw this beautiful way of behaving would unfold in a way where we're really satisfied that we had done the best that we could do, and that we had made progress to convince the person or to show them that they were really doing fine in so many ways. And most of the time, there's nothing wrong with the people that come to those healing circles. What is wrong is what was done to them. And that's where the spiritual side of things starts to play a role. Why do you get sick in the first place? Is it something because you're in the wrong place at the wrong time? Or is it something really that you're unfolding in a way where you're looking at why the universe gave you this opportunity to experience what you have, as difficult as it may be for you, but a way of moving forward? That is what's happening to America and to the world today. We're going through hard times that are growth pains. We haven't solved this whole business of how democracy can work. Fact is, we've done so many things wrong that we've at least eliminated some of those things in our hearts and minds, where we know that that's not the direction we want to take. So we know what not to do. And little by little, we're zeroing on what we could do. And we're offering you today out there a way of seeing how you can come together, how you can be open-minded and listen.
Yeah, and what you bring to it. What do you bring to the table? You know, if you are coming in from a heart-centered place, you'll start making choices, and you'll stop blaming the world for your problems. This is a tough one. You know, we all have a seductive way of getting caught into blaming. And if we can own it, we can shift it. Once you own this world is your dreaming, this is your movie. And it may suck sometimes, but it's not the nature of the world. It's not you. It's simply what you have led up to, and you can shift the way you are in that world. So how are we in this world? What do you bring into that world? And it's a beautiful moment to get to, because when we used to do those healing circles, some of the practitioners would back off and say, well, maybe my modality isn't the right one for you right now.
Exactly.
And two other people would say, wow, you really understand it, to the patient. You know, it's all about you having to love yourself more. And so they kind of
A lot of the time.
relinquished their techniques. And all of a sudden you saw there was less of a need for some oppressive way to process on that person. And that
Yeah.
person held a lot of the answers themselves.
That's right. That's what I call humanistic medicine.
Yeah.
You know, in typical conventional psychology, it's Freud and it's Erickson and it's the people who did all the research, and they have a system that tells you this is what normal is, and we've got to teach you now how you can change what you think and how you act, rather than the humanistic approach, which is to say, okay, so you're having episodes where you're seeing things that aren't there, or you're hearing things that aren't there. I'm not going to discount that. How do I know what you're really seeing or hearing anyway? Maybe you're the only one that sees what's really out there from the perspective you see. And if you can not have people have to deny things about themselves and to be able to accept them, and then you move in that direction where you're listening to what their world is like and try to be human about how you support what their system is like and be clever about how you teach them what's going on, things then become different. So this humanistic approach is a wonderful way that psychology is changing. And it's a whole new field that's really developed in about the last 30, 40, 50 years, something like that. And psychology is changing, and we're changing as we become more responsive, more able to respond to situations that call for a different approach.
Yeah, but still a lot of people, Len, a big chunk of society still is externally referenced. They're still
Absolutely.
letting people tell them what to think, how to act. This is what you should do. This is why you should feel. This is the norm. And you're going to either be in the norm and accept it, or you're going to be ostracized.
Yeah, that's right.
This is a trigger, a big trigger for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And if you're watching this right now, you might want to look at yourself and say, does that trigger me when that happens? Yes, it does. Sometimes all of us can feel that. Question is, what do you do when that moment happens?
Yeah.
Do you give in and give up your power and go with the flow to be accepted? Or do you say, you know what, that's not me. I am not going to buy that story. And right now we have a big story of fear being impressed upon us.
Absolutely.
And the question is, are you going to buy that fear?
Yeah.
Are you going to say, oh, you're right, there's something very scary going on, and I'll do whatever it takes not to be scared?
Yeah.
And that is not a good place to make your decisions from.
It's terrible. And it's about then acquiescing or not acquiescing. Are you going to have to take a pill, an antipsychotic pill, if you're seeing things or hearing things? Or are you going to have to take an antidepressant or something for anxiety? Is it about that? Is it about changing your perception through modern chemical technology? Or is it about learning from what's happening and not being discounted for what you think or believe? And ask questions about, what do you think if this was a situation? Or how do you deal with that other personality that's a problem for you if you're looking at multiple personalities? It's not about drugs and technologies, even though from time to time there's nothing else you can do. But to look at a way to force people to do things is not the right answer, because it's not about being pressured into thinking a certain way. You can't. You can't change people's minds by legislation. You change minds at the deepest way by inspiration, by being the role model that you want to be, that you can show people what's possible to do, and then see what happens. That's how real change happens. And we don't have that right now. We're being forced to do a lot of things that we're just told, this is what you do because we know better. And as we learn more and more about what those things are, it's like, are you sure? And then we get to a place where we say, that's wrong. Well, what are you going to do about it? Can you be responsible? Are you able to respond to that situation with something that makes more sense? And most of the time, the answer is yes, for some people, not others. I mean, try to walk into Whole Foods without a mask and see what happens. You'll be stoned. And yet, does the mask really work? Or does the lockdowns work? Does the social distancing work? Does the vaccine work? Are we collecting information that's correct with the PCR that's accurate? Are we tallying up our death rates in an accurate way? These are things that are imposed on us. Then we just assume, about 60% of us, that the government must know what it's doing and I should acquiesce to what it says because they care about me. Well, what we're finding out is that we're split. We've been divided. Some of us think of it that way, but a lot of us don't. And how do we get together? We're trying to tell you today how we see it.
Yeah, and the practical thing is many people will just do what they're told because they want to keep working. They want to
Yeah.
get on a plane.
They're
They want to
pressured.
do it. And I understand that.
Yep.
And most people say, you know what, I can't fight it anymore. I just need to go into that store. I mean, I'm curious because I make decisions where I just don't go to certain stores. Many stores
Right.
and airplanes and a lot of businesses are not getting my meager money because I just won't go for it.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's just, and that's my personal choice because I have to live with myself at the end of the day.
That's
And
right.
if other people have acquiesced and are doing it, that's okay. But you are feeding a world that will unfold
Yeah.
that may not be the world that you like. And you
Yeah.
can say, well, I'm doing the right thing because that's what I'm told to do.
Yeah.
And but yeah, if you feed a psychotic way of thinking, and I say psychotic because it's not based on science, it's based on a random set of metrics that
Artificial
seems to
rules.
change.
Yeah.
Right, Len? And
Yes.
I mean, look at the, I don't know. It's very hard to think of what's happening to the world right now. I have to just think about how I navigate through it. And
Yeah,
you have to
well-
think about how you navigate through it. And we have to try the best we can to be in our heart center. And you have to make some tough choices.
Yep.
But it's not to give in. It's not to believe without questioning because that might get you into trouble.
Oh, Gandhi had it worked out. He said, be the change you want to see. Wow. Talk
Yeah.
about making an example of something. Did that work in India? You bet. Can it work in the United States? You bet. But you have to be responsible. You have to have the ability to respond in a way that's heartfelt, that you feel is the right way to go. And to do that, like we've been saying, you've got to collect information that's information from all perspectives. This country is losing our ability to collect information. We're losing the ability to gather in groups that are large to be able to form communities. We are losing our right for speech. We're being imposed with rules that are, and can't you see it? I mean, who can't see that that's happening? And all under the guise of what? A bunch of rules, okay, that are not medically sound for the most part, even though we've been told that. So I can tell you that even the American Medical Association, which usually is not very much on the edge of new things, is saying, we know there are treatments for COVID-19. Why aren't you letting us use it, Mr. FDA and Mr. CDC? And I totally agree. It's a little bit late for a lot of this because we've got a whole year of problems now because of that. But we are uncovering that. And people are starting to see that there is another side. And they can take a side if they listen. That's the right side for them. Then let's get back to the grassroots and see what the consensus is. That's America.
And let's pray for that. Let's pray for the heart of America and the good health for people, and that good choices will be made and people will continue to be courageous to ask for as much information as takes to be able to make a good decision. That's really the best we can do. And we all need to really come from that centered place, not from an angry place or a fearful place, but from a centered place and demand that information. So, the leaders will feel that. The leaders will only feel
the pressure,
the influence. Yeah. The influence of the way people think. If you have given up, the leaders will give up. They're a mirror in many ways.
Well, a good leader is a good follower.
Yeah.
People forget that. And they will follow us. And what we support is what's going to grow. So if you're buying stuff on Amazon and you're doing stuff on Facebook and you're doing things on YouTube and all these other places or Twitter, and you think it's okay that they're doing what they're doing, you're supporting something that's getting us in the position we're in because they're taking away our freedom to be able to get information that's not censored. It's not the way to go. So we have to come together, and we're slowly doing that. I'm seeing change. People are starting to ask questions like, is this really right? I notice that so many times people come to my office, they got a mask on. And the first question I ask them is, do you want me to wear a mask? And a lot of the time they'll say, well, yeah, I do, because I'm scared if you don't. Others will say, well, can I take my mask off so I can breathe?
Yeah.
So there's a lot there that's controversial. And what we need to see is both sides of the story. And what we continually see in the mainstream news is one size fits all. It's a mask, it's social distancing, and it's the lockdowns. And then it goes on to many of the topics which we've covered so many times.
Yeah, and again, if it really helps, we'll do it. I mean, if it really is going to stave off a terrible, high death rate disease, we'll do it. But if it's not, we should think twice why we're being convinced about these things. We all want to do what's right. We don't want to do something that, at least for me, I have a very hard time doing something just to please somebody else's insanity.
Can't do that.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You know how that is? Like that's in a personal relationship, in like a marriage or a partnership of any kind. When you do that, there's a word for it. It's called empowering the other person.
Exactly.
And you tend to empower their weakness.
Yes.
So it's a weird word, empowerment. It should be disempowering, but it's called empowering or what's the other word, Len, they use? You are enabling. You're enabling that person's weakness or disempowerment.
That's
so
right.
We are enabling our government. We are enabling the managers of a store. We're enabling people when they're doing things that don't make sense.
Yeah, well, that's true. We have to take responsibility, because if we don't do that, we're not going to have trust and faith in ourselves or in the community we live in. We have to be trendsetters. We have to be people that work on the frontier of change, and to do it with great thought, with great reverence for how things are going. And if you think America is doing just fine, just keep doing what you're doing now, because the direction we're taking it is not chaos. It's organized to make America fail.
I want to see more town meetings.
I do too.
I mean, this is, I would love to, and really open-minded ones where they're not censored and they allow different voices and really have enough time, 2 or 3 hours long, and sit and talk in person. This is what this COVID thing has been a real shame, because it's not allowing people to come together. And it's very different if you're online with a Zoom session. They're great and everything, but it's not the same as when we used to have those health medicine forums and 300 people were in a room.
Yeah.
And you could read the energy of the speaker. You could see their authenticity or disauthenticity. You can see the people around you and how they responded. I pray we're going to get back to a place where we can do that, because I think people have learned a lot in this last year. And these public gatherings will be very different than they were a year ago, don't you think?
Yeah, well, we need representation for the things that we're engaged in democracy. It's like taxation without representation. That was all what the Boston Tea Party was like a few hundred years ago. And we're getting the same thing again. We're being told what to do, if you want to call that the tax. So there are ultimatums that are made and mandates that are made, and we don't have much to say about it. And who are the people that are making the mandates? People in Congress ultimately are responsible for that. And who are they responsive to? Who are they responsible to? It's people that you wish they wouldn't be, because a lot of it's corporate America, or even worse, where the money comes from. And it can come from any place. It can come from the mafia. It can come from a church. It can come from a school fund. And are you okay with where it's coming from? Is that course of action that they're taking the one that you want, that you believe in? I don't feel that way today. I feel disenfranchised as an American because of what is happening in our Congress. I feel all the Republicans, for the most way, are voting in one direction, and that most of the Democrats are doing the same thing than the other. Who's thinking from a heart-centered place that's sovereign about doing the right thing? Who's doing that?
Well, it's curious that a lot of people are starting to talk about maybe we need to have a third party. And this has happened before. This is nothing new, but it's very interesting to see people who are normally Democrat will say this to me. People who are normally Republican are saying this to me. It's fascinating. So people want if you really get to the average person, there is a very centrist view that most people would agree on. And you'd probably get a massive majority if there was a party that represented these people, that had some really good liberal views and some very good conservative views. And you find that those people in that group share those views
Yeah.
within that realm.
And where
And
you
we don't
listen
have that nowadays.
no, you listen to variety too. It's nothing,
Yeah.
and we need a third party that's representative of the people. And that's what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
that's exactly what we need. Having the parties that we have now, what's that? I don't feel loyal to either party. In fact, I'm upset about the way both parties are acting like little kids trying to punish each other. And there are big stakes here that are not okay with me. And I want to see a party come alive that says, what do you think, people that live in Contra Costa County, where I live, or in someplace where you live?
Mhm.
I want to know what kind of people are going to listen to that. I want representation from the people who I voted into office. And I don't feel I have that anymore. I don't feel that the people that I have reached out to, who are my local representatives, are listening to what I have to say, because they've got another agenda. And most of it is, can I get reelected? Where am I going to get the funds to do that? That really upsets me, because that's not how democracy should work. It should be serving the people. How can I listen to my constituency and have town hall meetings, just like you said, so that we can do something to form an opinion that's our opinion, not somebody else's opinion, or not one party's opinion or another party's opinion. A lot of the time when I go to the polls, I don't know who the hell to vote for, because they both suck. And neither
Yes.
one of them are interested in what I think. And when I try to reach out to them, I can't even talk to them.
Yeah, it's so sad. So maybe all this is for the good. Maybe what we'll see coming out of this insanity is a new view of things. And maybe there'll be leaders who rise up and start to appeal to people who have normally been on one party or another. Not that this is about politics. This is about life.
No,
This is
this
about people.
the way
It's
we
about
live.
democracy is not really politics.
That's
You have
right.
to understand, democracy is the underlying human rights vibration of being alive. Politics is typically the way to implement democracy.
Yeah.
So what we've seen now is politics becoming the foundational part, and democracy, I don't know where democracy is. It's not a democracy in the definition that I learned in political science.
No, it's not here. We have to reclaim it. And the
Yeah,
good
we gotta
news
get back there.
is that there's a resonant field that we're creating, where people are starting to think the same way. They're understanding that there's corruption at almost every level, and that your
Yeah.
voice is not taking any kind of effect. So if we can build that coherent field and all enter it, even through meditation or just through intention, things can and will change. I have great faith in that, because I think humanity, when it gets tough, comes together. When there's a catastrophe, we're there. If there's an earthquake or a tsunami, or there's a atomic bomb that goes off, or some horrible thing that happens, we'll do anything to help the people that are in need. But until we get to a certain threshold, we get complacent. And it turns out like it's turning out now. It's time to stand up as Americans and demand that we have responsible people who are going to represent us, not other interests that are terrible. And that's the voice of reason today. That's our
Good, Rick.
message. Francesco and I are adamant about that. So thank you for listening. Sorry we got so much excitement about this, but this is really important stuff. And both Francesco and I are committed to that. That's what America's about. So join us and start thinking in a way where you have a voice of reason too. Thanks
Right
for
on.
joining
Thank
us.
you, Len. Good work,
See you on
Len.
Monday.